Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time it is a review of the 1984 Christmas chiller Silent Night, Deadly Night. He knows when you've been naughty. Now, before I get into this review, I want to give a very special shout out to Jonathan Lindsay for sending me this Blu-ray and for his generosity. And I hope he enjoys this video, and I hope you enjoy it as well. I know this is a little bit late, but there are a lot of people who still have Christmas trees up in their living rooms and Christmas lights still on. And it's one of those movies that, if you ask me, it's always welcome any time of the year. It's not like people only watch Halloween on Halloween. So I think you can definitely say the same for this film. Now, Silent Night, Deadly Night was released in 1984. And pretty soon after its release, and actually before its release, in fact, as early as the trailer first airing on television, the film was just absolutely ravaged by parents and all kinds of people for its offensive nature. You had a bunch of people getting triggered over the film, daring to besmirch the good name of Santa Claus, the sanctity of Santa. You know, it's one of those things where you had a bunch of people who had candy canes up their asses who got triggered over the movie just destroying their idea of Santa Claus. In a lot of ways, just going to extremes, saying things, you know, of course, the typical, like, think of the children. And it's just one of those things that the film became synonymous with this controversy. The controversy, in a lot of ways, made the film have a bigger impact than it ever would have. So if these concerned parents and these concerned film critics, like Siskel and Ebert, who went as far to list off the names of the producers of the film live on air and tell them, shame on them. Like, literally, that's what they did. They listed off the producers and then said, shame on you for making this movie. So if they didn't go to this absurd amount of lengths to try to ban this movie or try to pan it, it probably would have fallen into obscurity and not had nearly as much of a cult following. I think it definitely still would have gotten some fans for sure, because it honestly is a fun film. But it's one of those movies, though, that I definitely don't think would have wound up being as big as it is in popular culture among its group fan base, you know, among its core fan base without this controversy. So if they just shut the hell up and didn't go see the movie, then they would not have made the film bigger. So, but it's one of those things where it's just, I'm glad that they didn't, because that just led to more people discovering this movie. And as a lot of people say, any kind of publicity is good publicity, and with a horror film, which is trying to attract a teenage to young adult audience, having parents being triggered and pissed off about it, that's excellent publicity. In fact, the film probably would have done better in theaters if it was kept in theaters because of the controversy. But the studio wimped out and pulled it from theaters. And it ultimately got its fan base on home video when it was released on VHS. And those who saw it on VHS for the first time got to see the uncut version. So that added even more to the infamy. And then, of course, you had the tagline, which is, you know, the movie that America didn't want you to see. You know, that whole thing where it's just like, oh my God, you know, it just, when you say something like that to that particular audience and you tell them, like, this is the movie that your parents or people didn't want you to see, they got banned, you ultimately want to see it. You want to see it to see how crazy it is. And in all honesty, compared to films like a Serbian film or August Underground, this is really tame. Like, this is a movie where you kind of don't get the controversy, despite the fact that it exists. Is one of those things that's like, so the controversy was just that Santa Claus was a killer? Like, grow a sack. Or get over it. Like, it's just one of those things that's like, did you not remember a killer Santa Claus in the Amicus anthology Tales from the Crypt, in the segment and all through the house? I mean, it's not like this is the first film to ever have a killer Santa Claus. And also, did you really forget like how creepy the character of Santa is? Period. He sees you when you're sleeping. He knows when you're awake. He knows if you've been bad or good, so be good for goodness sake. I mean, this is a man who breaks into people's houses at night, creeps around the children or around the house. I mean, this character is inherently creepy. He has a list, of all the things that you've done in your life. Like, if this wasn't Santa Claus and there was just some random guy trying to do all these things, you'd shoot the motherfucker. So this is what I'm talking. I mean, you would be genuinely terrified, and you would want to hide your children from this person. But in our world, in these parents' world, Santa Claus is sacred, and he's right up there with Jesus as some kind of sacred deity. And how dare you try to insinuate that Santa Claus is evil or bad? You're putting into my kids' heads that they can't trust Santa Claus. I mean, it's just one of those things where when you think long and hard about Santa Claus, it's inherently creepy. It just is. And when you also dig deeper, you find out this idea of Santa Claus that we are so familiar with, it was created by corporate America. It was created by retail stores and retail giants to get people to buy more products during the holidays. So the fact that this movie turns all of that on its head and makes that corporate image of Santa Claus and turns it into this visage of terror and madness and violence and the complete opposite of what it's known for, I think it's honestly pretty clever. And I give it credit for going there. So, yeah, I just had to get that out there because I know a lot of people, when they talk about this movie, they talk about the controversy. I mean, seriously, folks, go read some of the reviews that this film got when it came out. Look up some of the comments from some of these concerned parents. It's an absolute riot. It really is. So the film, directed by Charles E. Sellier Jr., and he's a director who is well known for doing stuff like Grizzly Adams. He did The Boogans. He's not well known for doing sleazy slasher movies like Silent Night, Deadly Night. And he really would not go on to do that much else like this afterwards, because it's not really his idea of a film that he would personally prefer. I think he took the job because it was a job and it was offered to him and it was available, and he decided to put some things aside and get it done. That being said, his direction in the film is adequate at best. It's just average. You can tell this is a very low-budget affair. The overall quality of the film, in terms of direction or other elements, is not really, particularly amazing in terms of production values or the look or the feel of the film. Definitely has a grindhouse sort of vibe to it, but I think that's intentional. And Sellier's direction isn't anything particularly amazing or memorable. Definitely looks like a TV director. I would say the best direction is from the second unit director, who also was the film's editor, Michael Spence. He did the direction for some of the best looking shots. The director didn't even want to direct any of the controversial like kill scenes. He found them to be too controversial for his tastes. So he didn't really shoot a lot of the death sequences. They were shot by other directors. So he wasn't really that comfortable with the subject material. But, the direction isn't anything that's a negative. It doesn't hurt the film. I don't think if he had any more directing tricks in his bag of tricks, so to speak, it really would have made the film any better. Uh, it's one of those movies where, so what? Like, well, he knew how to do a particular wide shot or a wide angle, or he knew how to do a panning shot or a one shot sequence, all in one shot with the camera panning around. It's one of those things that's like, are any of these tricks of the trade really anything that would have elevated this sleazy slasher to any higher of a height? Probably not. Only maybe marginally, just a little bit. It was never going to be one of those things where if the direction was particularly spectacular that the movie was going to be a masterpiece. So for what it is, direction is fine. The screenplay by Michael Hickey, I think it's honestly great. I think it's a great script for what it is. It's got some genuine moments of humor. The speech by the crazy grandfather, which is talking about Christmas Eve is the scariest damn night of the year. He's just totally out there. Can't help but laugh at the absurdity of this speech by the grandfather, talking about Christmas Eve is the scariest damn night of the year, about, Santa only gives presents to those who have been good all year. The naughty ones, he punishes. So, the writer Hickey, he knew that. He knew that he was writing sequences that were meant to be comedic. And I think that was to the film's benefit. This sequence, the sledding sequence, the montage in the toy store, there are a lot of moments in this that really do bring some much needed levity to the film, because a lot of the film is very heavy and twisted and dark and sleazy. So having those moments definitely helped the film be more entertaining. I think if they weren't in the film, it would be a little bit too dark and a little bit too dull and a little bit too depressing to really get into. But that being said, I think those elements worked really well too, and to the film's benefit, especially the backstory that he develops for the character of Billy, the tragic backstory. He manages to do something with this script that's incredibly difficult, which is to take a character who is both the antagonist and the protagonist and make this character and this story compelling. That's not easy to do, and I think he deserved a lot more credit for his work here by taking this Jekyll and Hyde character of Billy and believably making you sympathize with him. In the end, he just wanted to be good. He didn't want to be naughty, but this is a poor individual who had so much trauma in his life at a key part of his life growing up that he was just damaged beyond repair. And it just took one night of dress up as Santa Claus to cause him to lose his sanity for good. It doesn't completely excuse Billy from his murders, but it offers an explanation for them. So anyway, so you have this Jekyll and Hyde character in Billy, and the writer, Hickey, he provides an explanation for why he becomes this crazy Santa Claus killer, which is something that, he easily could have just chose the lazy route and not even provided anything other than he's just crazy. But he didn't go that route, and I think that's something that makes this film stand out from a lot of other films like it, is this realistic backstory, this legitimately tragic backstory. I mean, the death of his parents is a harrowing, intense sequence that is hard to shake. And then you have, on top of that, you have the fact that Billy wound up in this orphanage, which is headed up by this superior bitch and Mother Superior, whose idea of disciplining him is to punish him, because naughty boys should be punished and punished severely. And that just, all of these things just tie together into his damaged psyche and just bring validity to the crazy uh, idea of what Santa Claus is in his mind from that horrible night when he was a kid and his parents got murdered by a robber dressed as Santa Claus. Directly after this crazy speech by his grandfather talking about how the naughty ones get punished by Santa Claus. So when he gets killed, and by the end of the movie, spoiler, he gets shot to death, his last words are, Santa Claus is gone now. It's okay. It's okay, Santa is gone now. And it's a little bit sad and tragic because of the fact that, you know, this is the idea of what he thought Santa Claus was because of everything that happened to him when he was a kid and how he was raised. And in a lot of ways, what he dealt with in his life is legitimately scary in its own way. Now, this approach isn't always the approach that writers should take with this kind of material. I mean, for instance, the most effective rendition of Michael Myers is the one that just flipped out and lost his mind one Halloween night and killed his sister with no explanation whatsoever. Like, that's the more terrifying rendition of Michael Myers, the one that is influenced by the unknown instead of Thorn, instead of the typical serial killer reasonings like in the remake where, oh, he just had a bad childhood and blah, 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 blah. But with Silent Night, Deadly Night, I think the backstory works because it helps make the film whole and makes it more than just a movie where there's a crazed guy running around killing people in a Santa Claus suit. But even those aspects are still quite effective. I mean, it has one of the most memorable kills that I can think of. I mean, when he grabs Linnea Quigley and just stabs her on a deer head. So there are some imaginative kills in this. Definitely watch the unrated cut if you want to see the full shock value of these kills, because the theatrical cut doesn't really give you all of that. There's a lot of cutaways and things like that. It's one of those films that the story is simple, but it's effective enough. I will say this, despite the fact that it's compelling and it is intriguing and it does grab your interest and it isn't, to me personally, I don't think it's boring or that dull. It might have benefited from a little bit more character development of the cop that ultimately provides the final blow to Billy to end his reign of terror, because you don't get really much character development at all with that character. It didn't have to be the protagonist, so to speak, but give us a little bit more to go off of than the breadcrumbs that we get with this particular portrayal and this particular character. I think the intent was to have Sister Margaret be more of this protagonist or the force that is trying to stop Billy, but she wasn't really that effective at that because she just comes in and out of the movie. So I think the script could have done a little bit better job in that regard. But overall, I think the script is solid for what it is. I think it does a remarkable job creating a compelling story about this crazed Santa Claus killer. And the backstory of why Billy eventually does what he does is every bit as worth watching as the eventual rampage. So the cast is a mixed bag. So you have some genuinely great performances, like Lilyan Chauvin as Mother Superior. She plays her role really well. Apparently, in real life, she was a really sweet, nice lady. She wasn't a bitch. She wasn't this just mean, twisted, uh, none. That really wasn't her true character. But she did a wonderful job. She did a great job playing this character and playing it to the hilt. You hated her. You absolutely loathed this character. But at the same time, there were some moments where you kind of respected her and you kind of saw why she's so respected and appreciated by her peers and by other kids, because there were moments where she was actually genuinely sweet and a little bit charming, but that's undone by her extreme methods of discipline. And on the other spectrum, on the other side of the coin, you have Sister Margaret, who was also wonderfully portrayed by Gilmer McCormick. I really liked her performance. I was a very likable character. I would have liked to see more scenes with her, more for her to do, because, like I said, she kind of comes in and out of the movie. And, you know, Linnea Quigley, she plays a horned up girl named Denise who just wants to bang her boyfriend and ultimately gets banged on a buck. But, you know, it's one of those things that uh, she does good. She does a nice job with the character she's asked to portray. This isn't like Oscar worthy acting, but that's not what she's asked to do. And neither it is the performances by anyone else. Britt Leach, it was fun seeing him play a Mr. Sims, the drunk owner of the toy store Ira's Toys. I remember him from an episode of Tales from the Crypt called Only Sin Deep. He played the pawn shop owner who's trying to get people's beauty so he can make his dead wife look like she did the day she died. Um, so he was well cast here. I also liked Nancy Borgenricht as Miss Randall. And for the most part, I think Robert Bryan Wilson was decent as Billy. He's not as memorable as the he's not as memorable as Ricky, Eric Freeman from Silent Night Deadly Night Part 2. But for an actor who had little to no experience acting, the performance is good. It's not great. It's good enough. He does the physical stuff well. He's genuinely imposing when he's in the Santa Claus suit, when he's going on this rampage through the small town. And I think he nailed the innocence of the character well, too, because when he first starts out of this toy store, he's this strapping, big, young man who has a lot ahead of him. Looks like he has a good future ahead of him if he can just get his head on straight. You're rooting for him. You're rooting for him to get the girl and be good. But that's not what happens. And I think the casting was great because you have this almost cherub like figure as this killer Santa Claus. It was a different and interesting dynamic that I definitely liked. I liked it more than some of the other typical killer crazed Santa Claus killers in other films like this. This is the boy next door. This is not somebody who you would expect to snap and go on such a bloody rampage. So I think that was the intentional decision by the casting director, and I think it was the right one, because there's another thing that helped the film stand out from other films like it, and even other slasher movies, because a lot of slashers didn't really have pretty boys, didn't really have the high school quarterback play the killer. There were some exceptions, but that was not the norm. And I also thought the kids, especially the actor Danny Wagner, who played 8-year-old Billy, I thought he did a good job too with his performance. I didn't think the actor Jonathan Best, who played 5-year-old Billy, was that great, but I think they were just trying to go for a cute little kid. I don't think they were really going for acting or acting ability with that particular character or that performance. I mean, the cast is fine, but like I said, it's a mixed bag. There's some good character performances here. The lead, he's fine enough. He's not amazing. He's not spectacular. He has a little bit of a limited range, Robert Brian Wilson, but he's fine enough for what they're trying to do and what he's offered with the script. And other actors and actresses managed to also make their marks. But yeah, it's one of those films that you're not really going into it for acting anyway. You're not going into it for performances. You're going into it for the gore, for the sleaze, for the TNA. That's what you're going into Silent Night, Deadly Night for. And it does provide all of those elements, if that's what you're looking for. Now, the music by Perry Botkin, just like the cast, it's another mixed bag. There are some bits of the score I like that are dissonant and crazy and really do ramp up the insanity and disturbing nature of certain sequences, especially during the sequence where the Santa Claus kills Billy's parents. But there are other moments where it's a little obnoxious and just sounds like somebody's cat just jumped on a keyboard. So it's a mixed bag. Even the stuff that I do like that I feel adds a lot to certain sequences are not bits of music that I would listen to on my spare time. They're a little bit too dissonant, a little bit too chaotic for that kind of casual listening. The cinematography by Henning Schlierup, just like the direction, it's serviceable. I did like the way that the cinematography was shot, as well as the direction and the sequences that took advantage of the creepy nature and mood and atmosphere of the department store, and how creepy some of the moving electronic Santas were, or the Nutcrackers. In fact, the second unit director, as well as the editor Michael Spence, he directed a lot of those extra shots that were used quite effectively in the film. And speaking of Michael Spence, I thought his editing was honestly pretty excellent for what he was asked to do. I really didn't see any moments with the editing that was particularly bad. I would say the theatrical cut does have some moments where it kind of cuts a little bit awkwardly, and you can tell where these awkward cuts happen when you watch the unrated version, because there's a dip in quality between the remastered HD transfer of the film versus the home video footage of the uncut version. But yeah, I the editing, other than a few moments here and there, I did feel was excellent for this type of movie. I mean, you're not expecting Oscar-winning editing in Silent Night, Deadly Night either, but for, what is asked of the editor, he does a good job. I want to mention the music, the original songs that they use. The song that was in the montage sequence, I thought was a corny but fun little theme that definitely reminded you. It reminded me a lot of like the type of jingle that you would hear on an advertisement in the 80s. So that was something that I thought was a lot of fun. The original song that they did called Santa's Watching, it adds to the creep factor. Santa's watching, Santa's waiting, Santa's creeping, da 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 da. I like the fact that the writer of that song and the composer, They just went full tilt into the creepy Santa thing. They were just like, yeah, we know Santa's creepy. We're just gonna go all the way with it, and we're just gonna call the song "Santa's Watching." So I like that. The gore and the makeup effects, they're there. Uh, the most effective bits are the kill with the deer's head, as well as the sleigh sequence, which slays me every time. It's so hilarious. I mean, you got these two kids who are hanging around. They're getting ready to go down a hill on their sleighs. You have what I guess is supposed to be bullies from the same high school, or I don't know where. I mean, they're two grown ass men, clearly, and apparently they want to have some fun. And I guess they're too fucking poor or too fucking lazy to get their own sleds, so they tell the kids to fuck off, even punch one of the kids in the stomach, steal their sleighs. I mean, their sleds. They're not really sleighs, but they might as well be. So they steal their sleds, and then as one of the bullies, he goes down the hill. He gets decapitated, and his buddy's waiting for him to come down the hill, and he sees his head roll down the hill. And I think that the actor's reaction is what makes me laugh too. It's just the absurdity of it too. Two grown men fucking with kids on Christmas Eve, stealing their sleds, and then one of them gets their head cut off by Killer Santa Claus. I remember when I first saw that scene in the theater, I cracked up, and the whole theater was laughing. Um, that was a pretty good effect. The decapitation. Um, Keep in mind, folks, it's a pretty low budget film. So what they were able to do with their gore, I commend it for, because they could have easily just been he just strangles somebody, or it's just after the fact kind of shots where somebody strangled with Christmas lights, or just stuff like you saw with the shop owner where he had a hammer in his head. They could have easily went that route, but they chose to be a little creative, and I think that was to the film's benefit, and definitely one of the things that stands out for a lot of people, and one of the things a lot of people like about this movie is it's some of its creative kills. Um, Overall, I think it's paced quite well, whether you watch the theatrical version or the unrated cuts. The only part where it really slows down, and one of my biggest problems with the film, is the sequence near the end where there's a police officer who's just going around the orphanage trying to find Billy. And the sequences in the machine room or whatever it is are well shot, and it's a creepy location, but it's just dragged out way too long. The film is building up a really good pace and is going at a really good clip, and then this sequence happens and things just come to a halt. And this sequence is only like 5 minutes, feels like it's 15 minutes long. So yeah, I don't really care for that sequence. I think it should have been trimmed down considerably. I'm not the only one. The writer of the film, he has the same issues with that sequence. He also feels that it feels like 15 minutes. So, I'm definitely not alone in that instance. But that's one of the few genuine flaws that I personally saw with the film. Overall, I like it a lot for what it is. And I don't really know what else to say about Silent Night, Deadly Night, except if I were to rate it out of 5 stars, I would give the film 4 out of 5. It gets knocked down. It doesn't quite get 5 stars because of the sequence with the cop that slows down the pacing, the lack of character development for the cop who delivers the final shots on Billy, and just if a little more of the levity would have been nice, a little more of the humor, because it just feels like it's just peppered in there. It doesn't feel like this is a movie that was intending to be a satire or intending to be a comedy. It's just more of a slasher movie with a really twisted tone that has some occasionally funny moments. But those are really the only problems I have with the movie. Overall, I enjoy it quite a bit. I find it a entertaining chiller, and yeah, I don't really know what else to say. I've said everything that I wanted to say about the film, and then some. And all I have to say now is thank you for your cooperation, and have a nice day.